Umacina de Jardim Sereno eo a manhesser, banhada por uma luz suave e quente. O jardim apresentam caminho sin woso de paralelepípedos, lidedo por canteros de flores exuberants. A esquerda, uma serrageira madura esta em plena floriqueo, com suas delicadas pétalas seu arderosa caindo suavemente sobre o caminho. A direita, uma variedade de flores coloridas, incluindo rosas, lavanda e hortensias, esta em plena floriqueo, atraindo várias borboletas monarca e abelhas. No centro, uma pequena e ornamentada fonte de pedra com água, a cair suavemente number lego caio de nenúfares. Banco de madeira embelhecido esta ananjado, de beixo de serrageira, adornado com uma manta de malha conjugate. O fundo revela uma colina verde ondulant com gazebo, de pedra clássico no pico. Tudo sabem-se com tons de laranja suave, rosa e azul claro à medida que o sol nasce, com algumas nuvens finas. O ar esta ligeiramente nevoado, e gatas de orvalho sal visível em as folhas e pétalas. But I do hear it. At least, I try to. That's what this space is for. You think it's possible, you ask cautiously, to feel close to someone without really saying much? I pause for a moment before answering, because I think this is a moment, the one where everything shifts slightly. The question beneath the question isn't about communication. It's about whether you can be understood without having to justify your existence, without performance, without armor. Sometimes, I say, words only get in the way. Sometimes, just being in a room with someone who doesn't need you to be anything can be enough to start finding your way back. You look up at me for the first time in a while. Not past me, not through me, but at me. And that's when I realize maybe the real fear isn't loneliness. Maybe the real fear is being seen. Because being seen means being vulnerable. Being seen means having to let go of the carefully curated self you spent years constructing. It means letting someone witness your confusion, your fears, your rawness, and risking that they might not turn away. In that moment, the silence between us is no longer empty. It's pregnant with something real, a shared awareness, a flicker of presence. It's small, maybe even fleeting, but it's a beginning. You won't leave this room today healed. That's not how this works. But you might leave a little less invisible, a little more connected, not just to me, but to something inside yourself that you thought was long gone. Something begins when you stop trying to fill the silence with answers and start listening to what the silence has been trying to say all along. And in this shared quiet, we wait not for solutions, but for truth. You return to the room a week later, quieter this time. There's something different the way you sit, less guarded, like part of you is beginning to trust the space, but only just. You look around as if trying to remind yourself this is real, that the stillness of last time was an accident. You haven't spoken yet, and that's fine. I've learned that silence often carries more truth than the first 10 minutes of words. Eventually, you sigh, not out of frustration, but like someone letting go of a weight they didn't know they were carrying. I've been thinking about what you said about being seen. You begin. I nod slowly, waiting. I don't think anyone has actually seen me in a very long time. You continue, eyes fixed on the space between us, not in the way that matters. You explain that you've always known how to be what others need. With your friends, you're the listener. At work, the dependable one. In your relationship, the stable partner. You become an expert at offering parts of yourself that feel safe, acceptable, digestible. But lately, even those roles feel brittle, as if they're held together by expectation more than essence. What if I build my whole identity around what other people reflect back to me? You ask, a tremor in your voice. What if I don't even know who I am without that? It's not a rhetorical question. It's a reckoning. In therapy, we often talk about the real self and the false self. Donald Winnicott, a psychoanalyst whose ideas I carry closely into this room, believed that many people grow up adapting to the emotional needs of their environment, becoming who they're supposed to be rather than who they are. Over time, that false self becomes so polished, so convincing, that even the person wearing it can forget it's a mask. I tell you this not to diagnose, but to normalize, because what you're experiencing isn't madness. It's awakening. You look at me again, this time more directly. But if I've always been performing, then who am I when I stop? That question lingers in the air like incense, unanswered, heavy, sacred. You speak of moments in your life when someone almost saw you, a teacher who noticed your withdrawal, a friend who once said you seemed far away, a partner who touched your face once in silence, as if they sensed a sadness but didn't know how to name it. Each of these moments felt like a near miss, a hand reaching into the fog that couldn't quite find yours. Until now, because here, in this room, the fog is not being chased away. It's being named. And by naming it, you're giving form. You're letting me witness the parts of you you've hidden even from yourself. This is where therapy becomes more than just a conversation. It becomes a mirror. Not the kind you find in your bathroom or on your phone screen, but a reflective surface made of presence, patience, and radical acceptance. One that doesn't distort or flatter, but reveals. And I see you, not just the pain, not just the doubt. I see the parts of you that long for connection, but are terrified of what it might cost. The part of you that wonders whether you're lovable without your achievements, without your composure, without your roles. I keep thinking you'll get tired of this, you admit suddenly, looking almost embarrassed. That one day I'll come in and you'll be done with the mess. I smile, not because your fear is silly, but because it's so achingly human. The mess is the most honest part of you. I say, gently, and that's the part I'm here for. You sit with that. I can see it landing, not as reassurance, but as reality beginning to rewrite itself inside you. Something shifts. Maybe for the first time in a long while, you allow yourself to relax, not entirely, but a little. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing slows. You're not fixed. You're not even finished. But you're here, and you're letting someone see what's underneath the performance. That's not small. That's everything. This space, this strange, quiet room, becomes a rehearsal for life outside. A place where you practice being known, not just admired. Where you start to feel the difference between attention and attunement. Where you learn that you don't have to earn worthiness. It's not a reward. It's a recognition. You leave not with answers, but with a growing courage to ask real questions. And maybe, just maybe, when you look in the mirror tonight, you'll see more than just the surface. You'll see someone returning. Slowly, honestly, fully. You don't say it directly at first. Few people ever do. Instead, you speak of the unease that wakes you at night. The sudden shortness of breath, the tightness in your chest, the feeling that something terrible is about to happen but never does. You've had all the tests. Your heart is fine. Your blood pressure is fine. But something isn't. You sit across from me again, rubbing your fingers nervously, looking for language to wrap around what's chasing you in the dark. It's like, sometimes I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something, and if I look down, I'll fall. But if I keep ignoring it, it just follows me. I don't interrupt. I've heard this before, though never the same way twice. What you're describing isn't just anxiety. It's dread. The deep, existential kind. The kind that simmers beneath our routines and identities, waiting for silence or crisis to reveal itself. You pause, then laugh bitterly. I know how dramatic it sounds. I'm just scared all the time, and I don't even know of what. But you do know. It takes a few more sessions, a few more spirals and retreats, but eventually you name it. I think I'm afraid of dying. You look at me quickly, as if to check whether you've gone too far, as if you've just admitted a crime. But I don't look shocked, because you're not alone. Irvin Yalom once wrote that the fear of death is always just beneath the surface. We spend our lives dancing around it. We distract ourselves with routines, with relationships, with success. But in the still moments, the quiet mornings, the sleepless nights, it returns. Not with violence, but with a whisper. This will all end. One day, you will not be here. You sit in that thought now, trembling slightly. I know how heavy it is. But I also know this. Avoiding it won't save you. Only facing it will. Why now, you ask? Why is this fear suddenly so loud? There's never a simple answer. Sometimes it's triggered by a loss, a parent's decline, a friend's diagnosis, an accident narrowly avoided. Sometimes it's simply age, realizing that youth is not endless, that time doesn't pause. But most often, it comes when life becomes quiet enough to hear what's always been there. You tell me you started noticing how fragile everything is. How people vanish from one day to the next. How nothing seems to promise permanence. You talk about walking through a cemetery recently and wondering what your own headstone might say. I'm scared that I won't matter, you admit. That none of this will. That fear is older than you. It lives in all of us. The terror not just of dying, but of dying without meaning. We sit with it, not because I can make it go away, but because this is the work. This is where therapy stops being about symptom relief and starts becoming about truth. I tell you about the philosophers Yalom drew from, Heidegger, who said we must live toward death, not away from it, Epicurus, who argued that we don't fear death itself but the idea of it, and Viktor Frankl, who found that people could endure unimaginable suffering if they found purpose in it. Death doesn't destroy meaning. It creates the urgency to find it. You shift in your chair, still afraid, but now curious. What do I do with that fear? You ask, your voice softer. You don't run from it. You invite it in. You start asking better questions. What truly matters to me? What am I putting off because I believe there's more time? Who do I need to become before the end comes? Because the truth is, none of us are guaranteed more time. That's the terrifying gift of mortality. And the irony is, the more we deny death, the less fully we live. But when you turn to face it, really face it, it stops being just a threat. It becomes a teacher. The fear of death, you realize, isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that you are, in fact, fully alive, and that aliveness is the starting point. You don't need to conquer your fear. You need to walk with it, to let it sharpen your choices, to let it strip away the illusions that waste your time. In this room, you are not asked to be fearless. You are invited to be honest. And today you were. As you leave, you look back at me and say, it's still there, the fear, but it's different now. Yes, it is, because now it has a name. And in naming it, you've taken the first step toward living on purpose before the curtain falls. You come in this time wearing a quiet defiance. I've been thinking, you say, without waiting for me to ask. Maybe this whole thing, therapy, is just feeding a weakness. Maybe I need to get stronger, do it on my own. I hear the edge in your voice, but I don't mistake it for confidence. It's not conviction, it's armor. And like all armor, it is weight. You go on. You talk about how you've always been independent, how people have leaned on you, but you've never really leaned on anyone, how needing others has always made you feel exposed, childish even, weak. You learned early on to handle things yourself, to endure, to figure it out. I don't want to rely on anyone, you say, because people leave, people disappoint, and I don't want to need someone who might not stay. There it is. I stay quiet, letting the truth settle between us. I've heard these words before from people who've been abandoned, betrayed, forgotten, or simply let down too many times. Independence became your fortress, but what was once protection has now become your prison. Irvin Yalom often spoke about the illusion of the independent self. He argued that while we are ultimately alone in our consciousness, we are also inescapably relational. That paradox, existential isolation, and the hunger for connection sits at the heart of the human condition. You were taught, either by pain or by example, that needing others was dangerous, so you built a life around self-sufficiency. And in many ways, it worked. You've survived. You've achieved. You've managed. But you've also grown lonely, not just in the absence of people, but in the absence of being truly known. Because self-reliance, taken to the extreme, becomes self-erasure. You stop reaching out. You stop asking. Eventually, you stop expecting. And then one day, you stop feeling seen. You look at me now, maybe expecting a challenge or a contradiction. But instead, I say something simple. Who taught you that being alone was safer than being hurt? You flinch slightly, not physically, but in your eyes, something opens, something old. You tell me stories, not in order, not cleanly, but in fragments. A father who was present but distant. A mother who gave too much, then suddenly took it all back. Friends who only stayed as long as you were useful. A breakup that left you stare at your phone, waiting for a message that never came. I decided I wouldn't let that happen again, you say, I decided I'd be enough for myself. And you have been for a long time. But now, here in this room, you're beginning to wonder whether that decision made out of necessity has kept you from something you deeply need. To be held, to be met, to be mirrored. Not for what you do, but for who you are. We talk about Winnicott and the false self, that persona we create to manage the expectations of the world, to stay safe. We talk about Erickson's stages of development, and how trust is the foundation of human growth, not strength. And we revisit Yalom's belief that the deepest therapeutic work happens when we realize we are not islands, not machines, not lone wolves, but fragile, feeling, interconnected beings who thrive in mutual presence. You lean back now, quieter, less guarded. What if I don't know how to connect anymore? You ask, what if I've been alone too long? That fear is real. Reconnection isn't instant. It's not about forcing vulnerability or rushing into closeness. It's about unlearning what pain once taught you. That needing others means losing yourself. It doesn't. In fact, the opposite is true. You discover yourself most fully in the presence of another who truly sees you. Not someone who fixes you. Not someone who completes you. But someone who holds space for your becoming. This is what we're doing here. Not making you dependent, but helping you remember that strength and openness aren't opposites. That real independence isn't isolation. It's the freedom to choose connection without fear. You breathe differently now. I see it. You're still not sure. But the door has cracked open. The idea that you could need and be strong, that you could reach out and not shatter, it's new. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you feel that urge to disappear, to handle it alone, you'll remember this moment. That someone didn't look away when you said you were tired of pretending. That someone stayed. You gather your things, slower this time, as if reluctant to leave. You don't say much more, but as you walk toward the door, you turn and ask, "You'll be here next week?" "Yes," I say. "I will." And I will, because this is what it means to dismantle the myth of the independent self, not by force, but by presence, one shared moment at a time. You begin the session more slowly, as if carrying a heavier weight than usual. Your words arrive cautiously, like footsteps on thin ice. "I don't feel better," you say, almost apologetically. "I thought by now something would have shifted." I wait, letting the sentence breathe. You clarify, "I'm not depressed exactly, just tired, like I'm moving through fog. Nothing really feels worth it. I get through the day, but I can't tell you why." I nod, not in agreement, but in understanding, because what you described is something I've seen often, a kind of emotional erosion that doesn't scream, but whispers. Not a breakdown, but a slow forgetting of why you bother. You're not looking for joy right now. You're looking for meaning. There's a difference, and you're beginning to sense it. Mood is reactive. It fluctuates with circumstances, weather, hormones, disappointments, a bad night's sleep. But meaning is deeper. It doesn't erase pain. It carries you through it. Viktor Frankl, who survived in Nazi concentration camps and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, believed that our primary drive isn't pleasure or power, it's purpose. Those who endured the camps with a sense of why, an unfinished book, a child waiting, a spiritual duty, were more likely to survive, not because they were stronger, but because they had direction, something ahead of them. You've reached a point where your internal compass feels broken. You move, but without aim. You function, but without fire. That, too, is a kind of suffering. I ask you gently, when was the last time something you did felt meaningful? You stare out the window for a while. "I don't know," you answer. "Everything I do feels like it's for someone else, or because I'm supposed to. I get praise at work, but it's empty. I go to dinners, but I feel invisible. I'm busy, but I feel like I'm disappearing." And I believe you. You've built a life that works. But it doesn't feed you. It performs, it earns, it impresses, but it doesn't nourish. That's the quiet tragedy of many high-functioning people. Their despair doesn't look dramatic. It looks like competence. But inside, something essential is starving. I tell you what Frankl believed. Meaning is not something we wait to find. It's something we actively create, not through grand gestures or perfect clarity, but through engagement, through asking every day, what small thing matters? Who am I becoming by doing this? Yalom would add that meaning is often co-created, that we find it not just in solitary pursuit, but in relationships, in the impact we have on others, in the way we show up, especially when it's hard. You shift in your seat, quietly. So, I have to find meaning in this mess? Not quite. You don't find it like a lost key. You build it, one brick at a time, sometimes out of rubble, sometimes out of silence. We talk about the idea that meaning doesn't cancel pain. It makes pain bearable. Think of a parent staying up all night with a sick child. It's exhausting. It's draining. But it's meaningful. That meaning changes experience. It turns suffering into sacrifice, fatigue into devotion. You begin to explore what that could mean for you. You talk about things you once cared about. Writing, mentoring younger colleagues, volunteering. They've fallen away, buried under productivity and emotional autopilot. I used to think I had time. You say, time to get back to those things. But now I'm not so sure. And there it is again, death hovering in the background, not as threat, but as motivator. You don't have forever. None of us do. But instead of terrifying you, that truth starts to spark something else. Urgency. Not panic, but clarity. You leave the session without epiphany. No fireworks. But as you reach for the door, you say something that feels different. I'm going to reach out to that kid I used to mentor. Just check in. It's a small step, but it's a step toward meaning. And as Yalom says, the ultimate concern is not whether life has meaning, but whether your life has meaning. Today, you start asking that question, not intellectually, but personally. And that changes everything. You return to this room for weeks now. Each time, you sit in the same chair. The silence greets you like an old friend, or maybe a mirror. You've shed things here. Habits, pretenses, masks, and now, without quite realizing it, you've begun to inhabit your own skin a little more fully. Today, you don't rush into words. You look at me and say, I think I'm different. It isn't a declaration. It's a wondering, a quiet observation about something hard to measure, but impossible to ignore. There's no single moment you can point to, no breakthrough or revelation. But you start to notice the world responding to you differently. Or maybe you're just responding to it differently. This room hasn't offered you solutions, but it has given you a space to face yourself without flinching. And that changes everything. Irvin Yalom called it the existential encounter. That rare moment when therapy stops being about techniques and becomes a meeting between two human beings. No hierarchy, no masks, just presence. That's what you experience here. You didn't come looking for transformation. You came for relief, for some peace, maybe even to be fixed. But in the end, it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about beholding it all and holding it differently. You've grieved the illusions you lost, the illusion of control, of permanence, of being untouched by time. But in their place, you found something sturdier, something real, responsibility, meaning, connection. You began this process full of questions. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? When will I feel normal? But today, your questions are different. What do I want to stand for? What am I willing to risk feeling fully alive? Whom do I want to love better while I still can? You've left behind the search for the perfect narrative. Now, you want to live the story that's still being written. There was a session weeks ago when you looked at the floor and said, I don't think anything will ever feel different. And I didn't try to change your mind. I knew that if we stayed in the room long enough, if we stayed in the truth long enough, you would start to shift. Not because I guided you, but because you allowed yourself to be seen. And being seen does something. When a person is fully seen, without judgment, they begin to unfold like a flower that finally got enough light. You once thought you needed answers. Now you realize you needed a witness. And in witnessing yourself fully, your fear, your guilt, your longing, you discovered something radical. You can survive the truth. And more than that, you can use it. That's what this room has taught you. That what once felt unbearable could be endured. That the feelings you feared would destroy you didn't. That the person you thought you had to hide was the one most worthy of love. Yalom wrote, it's the relationship that heals. Not insight alone. Not catharsis, not prescriptions, but connection, the raw, honest, human bond between two people who dare to look at life and death without blinking. That's what happened here. And now, as you prepare to leave, not just this session, but perhaps this phase of your life, you carry something new. You know how to stay. In grief, in uncertainty, in love. You're no longer searching for a way out. You're searching for a way through. You won't always feel brave, but you'll remember how it felt to be brave here. You'll remember that you don't have to do it alone. The transformation isn't that your problems disappeared. It's that you change in relation to them. You're no longer defined by them. You're in conversation with them. And maybe one day, someone will sit across from you, confused and scared, and you'll know how to listen, not because you have answers, but because you remember what it means to be held in truth. As you reach for the doorknob, you pause. This place helped me become someone I can live with, you say, someone I can grow into. You walk out not with certainty, but with courage, not with a plan, but with presence, not with armor, but with honesty. You leave the room changed. And that changes everything. That if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of reflection. We release powerful stories like this every week, each one crafted to help you explore the depths of the human experience and connect more deeply with yourself. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own story. We read every one. Your journey matters. Let's keep growing together